"If you don't have money, don't come in here." That statement wasn't shouted, but it was cold, sharp as a blade, cutting through the store's silence as if poverty were a sin that needed to be cast out. The young student collapsed right in front of the dairy case. Her hair was matted with sweat. Her loose backpack slipped from her shoulder, and one shoe rolled away. She hadn't fainted from illness, but from hunger. She hadn't had a decent meal in 2 days. It was finals week, no money, no energy, not a single offer of help. The store manager, Darren Polk, merely glanced over her as if she were a pile of spilled merchandise on the floor. "Get her out of the aisle. We don't need this kind of drama in here." Not a blink, not a question about her condition, not an apology for letting this happen in a place that sold food. The entire store seemed to freeze. Other students stood there, stunned. Some turned away. Some quietly stepped out of the checkout line. But one person, a young employee with dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep, his arm still holding a heavy box of stock, gently set everything down and walked over. He knelt down, lightly touching the girl's shoulder. "Are you okay?" His voice was low and warm. Without waiting for a response, he helped her up and guided her inside. When he returned, he grabbed a sandwich, a carton of milk, then quietly pulled out his wallet, placing his own $10 bill on the checkout counter. "She's going to eat. She'll study later. But first, she needs to survive this lunch." No one in the store knew that. Far in the back, the man stocking shelves with bottled water, wearing a faded hoodie with a fake name tag that read Nick, was actually Andrew Wyatt, the founder of the entire supermarket chain. And in that moment, witnessing that small but powerful act of compassion, Andrew didn't just see a kind employee. He saw himself 25 years ago in a dingy grocery store where he too had craved a meal so badly his hands shook, but no one had reached out to help. This time, he wouldn't turn his back, because if a company starts punishing the last person left who cares, then what are we running a business, or just a soulless money-making machine? Andrew Wyatt wasn't the kind of CEO who liked to sit behind a boardroom table all day looking at charts. He had started from scratch a small rented store on the corner of Highland Street, right after the 2008 economic crisis. Back then, he did it all: mopped the floors, cleaned the refrigerators, printed his own promotional flyers, and knew every customer who walked in by name. Wyatt Mart was built not just on products, but on trust, on a morning greeting, and on a free pastry for the homeless. But that was 20 years ago. Now, Wyatt Mart had over 300 branches stretching across the United States. Andrew had a boardroom on the 26th floor, an assistant who read him financial reports every morning, and perhaps it had been too long since he'd priced a product with his own hands. He had once sworn he would never become an out-of-touch boss, but in recent years, that vow seemed to fade with the corporation's expansion. And then, a simple report made him pause. The Northgate branch, located in the middle of the Northgate University campus, had suddenly seen a 27% increase in revenue within 2 months, especially during midterms and finals. On the surface, it was a success, but to Andrew, it was too perfect. He flipped to the supplementary charts. Return rates dropped suddenly. Beverage sales skyrocketed. Increased inventory efficiency, a cold phrase often used to describe flexible cutbacks, was prominent in the report. The instincts of a man who once lived on loose change told him something was wrong. "This isn't how we used to do things," Andrew muttered, his eyes thoughtful. Since when did a store serving students profit by selling study energy combos that were more expensive than a hot meal? He decided not to send an email, not to call the regional supervisor. Instead, he booked a flight, chose a cheap hotel near the university, and spent an evening preparing a disguise, a faded hoodie, baggy jeans, old shoes, and a name tag that read Nick, a new seasonal employee transferred from the main warehouse. At 6:45 a.m., in the pale morning light, Andrew stood at the back door of the Northgate branch, looking no different than an exhausted student coming in for an early shift. No one recognized him. Even the store manager, Darren Polk, just glanced at him and said, "The back stockroom is a mess. Clean it up." No ID check. Not another word. A founder, now just a fake name, stepped into his own store like a ghost. And as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, as the smell of stale coffee and cleaning solution filled the air, Andrew knew he had entered a world he once belonged to. And now, perhaps he needed to find the very ideals he had lost somewhere in the corporate hallways. The back door opened into a monotonous world. The fluorescent lights flickered tiredly. The floor was damp with the smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with the scent of cheap coffee left over from the night before. There was no laughter, no morning greetings. Andrew or Nick grabbed a case of instant noodles and began stocking the shelves. His hands worked, his eyes observed. He saw students shuffle in, some dragging their backpacks, others clutching a single crumpled bill. They moved through the aisles like shadows gliding past the bread, pausing in front of the energy bars, then putting them back, hesitating, deliberating, leaving empty-handed. One male student bought a single pack of gum. A female student opened her wallet, stared at a few coins, then quietly folded it shut and walked out. No one stopped, no one talked, no one lingered. Andrew felt his stomach clench, not from hunger, but from something worse, shame. Not his own, but the shame that simmered in the hurried footsteps of those students, people who were clearly trying to survive a battle they had never been prepared for. He turned to look at the promotional displays, Finals Energy Combo, only $6.99, a can of energy drink and a candy bar, double the original price. The products were placed at eye level. The lighting was bright. Meanwhile, cheap bottled water was pushed to the lowest shelf, out of sight. The sale items were all nearing their expiration dates. This wasn't a promotion, it was manipulation. Andrew picked up a flyer. Fuel your finals, boost your grades, not your stress. He almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was bitter. Those flyers wouldn't help anyone pass an exam. They only made hungry people pay with their dignity. Near noon, Darren the manager patted him on the shoulder. "Good work. Nick, if you keep this up, I might let you work the register next week." Andrew smiled. staying in character, happy to learn. Here, Darren lowered his voice, gesturing around the store. Selling to students is simple. Just call everything brain food and they'll buy it. It's as simple as that. He laughed, but inside it was ice cold. Andrew hadn't come here to find fault with his employees. He came to see if his company still had its original soul, the philosophy of service before revenue, of community before the balance sheet. And so far, what he saw didn't just disappoint him, it scared him. He was scared that he had taken his eyes off a generation that needed help and had instead allowed his own system to squeeze every last penny from them under the guise of efficiency. He hadn't said anything yet. He hadn't drawn any conclusions. But from that moment on, Andrew began to take his role more seriously, because if what he was feeling was right, then it wasn't just one store that was off course. It was an entire value system that was eroding right under his own name. The second day began with a grey mist settling over the Northgate University campus. The shadows of students dragged themselves into the store, eyes dark-ringed, shoulders burdened by the weight of coursework, debt, and invisible expectations. Andrew stood tucked away by the beverage aisle, arranging cases of spring water, but his eyes were fixed on the checkout counter, where an employee with a slender build stood with a straight back, his hands in constant motion. His name was Jesse Tran. Jesse didn't say much, but every gesture carried weight. A female student fumbled with her wallet, then froze when she saw the total exceeded the cash in her hand. Jesse just said softly, "It's already been scanned through for you. No questions. No complaints." The girl thanked him profusely, her voice so quiet that perhaps only Jesse could hear. Another young man asked about the return policy. Jesse answered clearly, without using corporate jargon. Just simple, calm words. "I know you're stressed. I don't want to make it worse." Andrew began choosing work locations that were closer to the checkout counter, and he watched. Jesse had small habits when a customer was short a few cents. He'd round down on his own. If a package of cookies was broken, he'd put it in a small zip-top bag and place it next to the free coffee machine. When he saw near-expired bananas being discarded, he'd discreetly slip one into the backpack of a student who had just bought a notebook. None of these actions were announced. There was no silent hero sign. It was just Jesse, a minimum-wage cashier, quietly preserving the dignity of people who were struggling for every dollar. Andrew understood. He had been one of them. Counting coins, choosing between breakfast or photocopied notes, swallowing his hunger because his pride wouldn't let him ask for help. And now, he was witnessing another young person refuse to be a cog in an unfeeling machine. Jesse wasn't doing charity. He was being human. That afternoon, during his break, Andrew quietly stepped into the employee break room. Jesse was sitting on an overturned crate, eating half a sandwich and drinking water from a paper cup. Andrew feigned casualness. "It's really busy today." Jesse gave a slight smile. "It's finals week. A free food stand on campus could save 100 people right now. Aren't you afraid of getting in trouble for helping people?" Jesse shrugged. No justifications, no defensiveness. If I give something away for free, I write it down. It might get taken out of my paycheck, but some people walk into this store with empty eyes. You've seen them. They don't need a lecture. They need a little breathing room. That answer wasn't preachy. It was just the truth. Raw, real, unrehearsed. Andrew nodded. He pretended to go back to work. But in his mind, everything was spinning. The reports that had praised reduced returns and increased profits never mentioned Jesse. They didn't record the smiles he saved for others. They didn't record the coins he covered himself. They didn't record the actions that never made it onto a receipt, but saved someone's day. That's when Andrew realized, if this system still had a heartbeat, it wasn't in the corporate office, but behind the checkout counter, where an ordinary person was still choosing to do the right thing. That afternoon, the last wave of rush-hour customers had just left, leaving the store plunged into a weary silence. Inside the small break room behind the counter, Jesse sat on an overturned cardboard box, his uniform soaked with sweat, holding half a sandwich with hardened edges and a paper cup of tap water. Andrew walked in, staying in his role as Nick. He sat down across from him, relaxed his shoulders, and pretended to rub his knees as if tired from his shift. After a moment, he started a conversation. Every time final season comes around, this place turns into a front line. Jesse let out a soft laugh, not sarcastic, not bitter, just the laugh of someone who was all too familiar with the pressure. Yeah, people think students live on energy and deadlines, but hunger is still hunger. The atmosphere softened a bit. Andrew cautiously continued, "I've seen you help customers when they're short on money. Aren't you afraid of getting in trouble?" Jesse was quiet for a moment. He didn't seem surprised, nor did he seem regretful. "I keep a record of it all. If there's a shortage, I make up for it. It's not because I like playing the hero, it's just some days they don't have any other choice." "What do you mean?" "I mean, when someone is staring at a cup of instant noodles as if it's their only chance of survival for the day, making it harder for them doesn't make anyone stronger. I don't have much, but if I can help them get through an afternoon, I will." Andrew looked at Jesse for a long time, not because he was surprised, but because he was moved. The young man in front of him wasn't big, didn't speak in grand pronouncements, and didn't paint a picture of lofty ideals. But he was carrying on his shoulders something greater than any quarterly report or marketing campaign, the heart of the system. Jesse never waited for applause. He didn't seek recognition, and he probably never even considered that someone was watching him, let alone the founder of the company. Andrew nodded slightly, his voice softening. "Not many people think like you." Jesse shrugged, his eyes looking down at the scuffed tile floor. "Probably not, but I've been in their shoes. I've counted every penny. I've pretended not to be hungry. I just don't want anyone else to have to feel the way I did back then." Andrew didn't ask any more questions, because everything he needed to know was in that one sentence. That afternoon, the sky outside was slowly turning a gloomy, ashen orange. Inside the store, the cold fluorescent lights still cast their glow on every aisle, where students silently drifted past each other like shadows, hurried, exhausted and hungry. Andrew was pretending to adjust some bottled teas near the entrance when it happened, without warning, without a sound, just a heavy thud like a bag of groceries hitting the floor. It was followed by the soft splat of a bursting milk carton, the milk pooling on the cold tile. A young woman not even 20 years old had collapsed right in front of the cooler. Her hands were clenched, her hair was a mess, her eyes were shut tight, and one of her shoes had slipped off her foot. The bustling space suddenly froze. A few people standing nearby hesitated, then stepped back. A young man started to move forward, then stopped. Eyes met, then darted away, and then, from behind the counter, Darren emerged. But instead of rushing to help, he frowned, annoyed. What is it now? Who let her block the refrigerator? No alarm, no concern, just irritation at the inconvenience to business. A female student approached, speaking softly. She's in my class. She said yesterday she didn't have money for food. She said she'd eat after her exam. Darren waved his hand dismissively. Somebody call campus health services. But please, drag her away from the dairy case. We don't need this scene scaring away customers. Andrew was stunned, not by the action, but by the emotional callousness in those words. He was about to step forward when Jessie had already moved first, without waiting for instructions, without needing advice. Jessie knelt beside the girl, gently lifting her head into his hands, using a paper towel to wipe the sweat from her forehead. "Hey, can you hear me?" His voice was soft, not panicked, just a calm presence in the midst of chaos. Then he turned to her classmate, who was standing beside them, trembling. "Has she eaten anything?" "No, for 2 days. She's only had water. She wanted to wait until after her exam to eat." Jessie nodded as if this was nothing new. He stood up and said quickly to Darren, "I'll take care of it. She needs a place to sit. I'll watch the back stockroom." Darren grimaced. "Don't make a big deal out of it. Just make sure she doesn't cause any more trouble." Without replying, Jessie guided the girl into the break room in the back. Andrew followed from a distance, his arms full of uniforms he needed to fold, but his eyes glued to the unfolding scene. Inside, Jessie helped the girl sit down, propping her back up, then left for a moment. He returned with a granola bar, a bottle of water, and half of a half-eaten sandwich, likely his own unfinished lunch. "Eat slowly. There's no rush." The girl didn't say anything, just gave a slight nod, her trembling hand taking the water bottle, her eyes filled with gratitude and confusion. Jessie glanced quickly at the cash register, then pulled out his personal wallet. A $10 bill was quietly tucked into the drawer. He pressed a few keys, printed a receipt, and stuffed it into his back pocket. No one asked him to. No one saw. Only Andrew, standing in the corner of the doorway, pretending to fold uniforms and silently memorizing every detail. Not a single boast, not a single look seeking glory. Just one person choosing to do the right thing when no one told him he had to. As the girl began to come around, she whispered, "Thank you." Jessie smiled gently. "It's okay. You have more to get through than just one meal." Andrew turned away. his eyes stinging, not because of the girl, but because of himself, because all this time he had been sitting in an office praising polished reports, while silently someone like Jesse had been preserving the last shred of humanity in the system. The next morning, the atmosphere in the store was no different from the day before. Cold fluorescent lights, the soft hiss of the coffee machine at the counter, and exhausted students weaving through the aisles. Andrew arrived early, standing by the soda inventory, his eyes still fixed on the checkout counter. Jesse appeared on time. As usual, no phone, no complaints, just quietly rolling up his sleeves and starting to wipe down the counter. No one asked him to. No one noticed. But to Jesse, it seemed that cleanliness was also a way of showing respect to the people who would be walking up to it. For an hour, Andrew witnessed a few more small but precious moments. An engineering student pulled out his wallet, 42 cents short. Jesse said gently, "It's okay. The discount was already applied." A freshman nervously paid for a pack of noodles and a notebook, fumbling through his wallet for several minutes. Jesse smiled softly. "We have an internal discount today." Of course, there wasn't one. No one asked, but Jesse still gave. No one noticed, but Andrew saw it all. And then, by a stroke of chance, he discovered something that nearly took his breath away, while Jesse was outside helping with a delivery. Andrew stepped into the break room. An old, worn-out notebook lay on a shelf, slightly open. Unable to resist his curiosity, Andrew gently flipped through a few pages. Inside was not a personal diary, not work notes, but a silent ledger of kindness. The first page read, "If I have extra, I give. If I don't have extra, I borrow from myself." Andrew stopped. His heart tightened. The following pages were a detailed list: 4 peanut butter crackers, $1.89, 9 milk plus fruit, $3.12, 13 sandwich and water, $2.40, 15 instant ramen plus tissues, $1.75. Each item was clearly recorded with a date and price, sometimes with an added note like customer red hoodie or new student. First time here. Not a single name was written down. It wasn't recorded for reimbursement. It was simply to take responsibility for his own kindness. Andrew flipped to the last page. A line in capital letters, written in blue ballpoint pen: "If I don't write it down, who will cover it for me?" He stood motionless for a long time, not because the notebook was so special, but because it wasn't special at all. It had no PR story, no hashtag, no video to be posted on social media. Just a kind person, living with discipline, quietly and persistently being kind, knowing full well that no one would ever praise him for it. And in all his years of running the corporation, Andrew had never seen a single internal report that acknowledged that. How had he let himself become so detached from reality that he had to pretend to be an employee just to see the most human thing in the very company he created that afternoon? The stream of students continued to pour in like a tired river. Dazed faces, bloodshot eyes, Many held only a few loose coins in their palms, as if gambling on their only meal of the day. Andrew stood quietly near the gum rack, feigning to adjust prices, his eyes following Darren Polk, the manager of this branch. Darren was not like Jesse. He was loud, confident, sharp. He didn't serve, he commanded. He called out employees' names like items on a menu. He gave orders in curt sentences. And he always began his sentences with, "This is how we hit our KPIs. Push the Study Max combo harder. 2 energy drinks and a bag of snacks, $8. See someone loitering without buying anything. Don't let them occupy space. Remember to blast some EDM. Don't give anyone time to think. Speed is money." Andrew bit his lip. Those words, they should never have existed in the system he had dreamed of building. Things got worse around 2 p.m. A tall, thin student, wearing broken-rimmed glasses, walked timidly toward the manager's counter. His voice was soft and trembling. "I think the scanner made a mistake yesterday. My card was charged twice. Could you please check for me?" Darren didn't bother to look at the screen, didn't check the transaction, didn't ask another question. He just replied coldly, "Once it's scanned, it's done. The rule is no refunds during peak hours." Then he gave a slight nod, as if he had just made the wisest decision of the day. The student was silent for a second. His face went pale. Then he bowed his head and walked out the door. Andrew watched that retreating figure shrinking as if he had lost not just a few dollars, but his faith. But Darren wasn't finished. He turned to a part-time employee standing nearby and smirked. "Final season makes them panic. They're easily led. They'll believe anything you say. That's why we need to be smart about selling pressure." Selling pressure. Those 2 words felt like nails driven into Andrew's ears. It wasn't the first time he had heard this kind of thinking. Years ago, he had shut down a branch in a low-income neighborhood for the offense of selling overpriced combos and withholding change. At that time, he had sworn never again, not under my name. And yet now, right inside a store of that very system, he was witnessing the exact same thing from a man the system had once praised as the most effective manager of the quarter. A short while later, while Jesse was temporarily out on a delivery, Andrew slipped into a side stockroom and happened to overhear Darren on a phone call, his voice lowered but unable to hide its smugness. "Yeah, I keep the refund numbers way down. It's simple, tighten the procedures, write off what they call product waste as shrinkage. Who's gonna check?" Then he burst out laughing. "Those students, they'll pay $8 for sugar water if you label it brain fuel. I call it a crash course in financial literacy." Andrew stood frozen behind the door. His face didn't turn red with anger. It turned pale with a more terrifying realization. This wasn't a mistake. This was a strategy. And I had applauded it. He remembered the polished reports, the meetings praising the Northgate branch, the cold KPIs that no one questioned. How was this achieved? And Jesse with his worn-out notebook, the coins from his own pocket, the meals split in half, was buried beneath those reports. Andrew clenched his fists and quietly left the stockroom. He didn't speak up. He didn't reveal his hand right then. Because this time, he didn't just need to react. He needed to do something that would make the entire system look at itself. On the third evening, the air in the store seemed thicker than usual. The breath from the air conditioner wasn't enough to dispel the suffocating feeling that crept through every aisle. Students quietly pushed cans of energy drinks from one shelf to another, their eyes so tired there seemed to be no room left for hope. Andrew, still in his role as Nick, stood near the checkout counter, pretending to organize the cookie shelf. And then he witnessed a scene, seemingly small, but it sent another crack through the shell of his patience. A young student about 19 with a scrawny build, his hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets, quietly walked up to the counter. In his hand was just a small carton of milk. His eyes met no one's. He said nothing. He placed the carton on the counter, as if that simple act took all his strength. Jesse scanned the barcode. The number appeared, 179. The young man pulled a handful of coins from his pocket, 3 quarters, a few dimes, a nickel, and a bent penny. Total $1.59. He was short, exactly 20 cents. He hesitated, without a word. He was just about to reach for the milk carton, probably to put it back. A small gesture, but Andrew saw it clearly in his eyes, shame and familiarity. Then Jesse spoke, his voice as light as wind brushing the countertop. "You're good. We have an internal discount today." Without waiting for a reaction, Jesse put the milk in a bag, pushed it toward him, and tapped his finger on the counter. "Go study for your exam tomorrow. Milk helps the brain hold on to what you learn." The student froze. His eyes widened. A second later, he nodded. Then he turned and left, without managing to say thank you. But his eyes were the most beautiful thank you of the entire evening. And then, as if scripted, Darren walked out of the stockroom, just in time to see the end of the scene. He frowned, pointing at the bag. Was that paid for? Jesse didn't flinch, just answered concisely. He was short. I covered the rest. Darren laughed contemptuously. Great. So we're a charity now, are we? I hope you're not going to post this on Facebook with the caption, "Kindness every day." Jesse didn't respond. No shame, no justification. He just quietly turned back to his register and continued scanning, as if what had just happened was as normal as wiping the counter or folding a bag. Not a single apologetic glance. Not a single gesture of pride. Andrew stood by the gum rack, his hands lightly clenched, not because of Darren, but because of Jesse's quiet persistence. The way Jesse kept an act of kindness from becoming a performance. The way he continued to do the right thing, even when ridiculed, even when he had to pay out of his own pocket, even when no one acknowledged it. That was no longer just kindness. It was character, persistent, proud, and unshakable. At the end of the shift, when only a few stray customers remained, Andrew saw Jesse behind the counter, bending down to pick up a piece of paper from the floor, adjusting a shelf price, checking every ballpoint pen at the checkout station. No one asked him to, but he did it as if he were preserving something much bigger than a job. And in that moment, Andrew understood clearly. You can teach people how to sell, But you can't teach someone to be kind if they don't choose to do it every day, even when no one is watching. That afternoon, during a rare, brief lull with no customers, Andrew found Anna, a stocker and logistics employee, labeling a new shipment. Andrew still, as Nick spoke gently. "Is Jessie always like that?" Anna didn't look up, but a small smile touched her lips. "Him. He's been like that since his first day here. That good-natured." "Huh. No. A lot of people are good-natured, but Jessie is the kind of person who doesn't know how to stop, even though he's probably the one with the least to give." Andrew tilted his head, curious. "What do you mean?" Anna stopped what she was doing and looked up. In her eyes was a hard-to-name compassion. "He lost his dad when he was in high school. His mom left when his younger brother could barely talk. Since then, Jessie has been studying, working, and raising his brother. He never asks for a day off, never complains, never once late. There are months I'm sure he lives on nothing but instant noodles and instant coffee, but he still spares a few dollars to help a stranger who's short on money for breakfast." Andrew was silent. Anna continued, her voice softer. "I asked him once, 'Why don't you keep a little for yourself?' He just said, 'Because a long time ago, I also stood at this counter with a carton of milk and not enough money, and no one helped me.'" A silence enveloped them. Andrew swallowed hard. Not because Jessie's fate was so extraordinary, but because it was so similar to his own. Only Jessie had managed to preserve that beautiful nature in an environment where most people had chosen to adapt by becoming callous. Anna finished with a sentence that felt like a punch to Andrew's heart, I think. Sometimes Jessie gives away more than he keeps for himself. Not just money, but time, energy, the kind of kindness that is never recognized. Andrew turned away, pretending to look at a box of stock, but his eyes had changed. Everything he had ever been proud of in his company, the glossy reports, the awards, the KPI charts, could not compare to a person like Jessie. And it was in that moment that Andrew understood he could no longer just observe in disguise. It was time to confront this and fix it from the root. Friday night. The air in the store was as thick as a storm about to break. The fluorescent lights flickered as they always did, but inside, Andrew Wyatt, the company's founder, was no longer Nick. He was waiting for the final moment to end his performance. The last wave of customers thinned out, leaving only a few students rushing to buy energy drinks and instant noodles before the library closed. Jessie still stood behind the counter, calm. His eyes were weary, but his smile remained gentle. Darren had just walked out of the break room, clipboard in hand, speaking loudly. "Remember to push the study fuel package tomorrow. We need to go up another 15%. Got to have good numbers for the weekend." Andrew stood at the corner of the counter and took a deep breath. It was time. He stepped forward. He took off his old baseball cap. Then he unpinned the nickname tag. His shoes tapped lightly on the tile floor as he walked to the very center of the store. Jessie looked up, frowning slightly. Darren's face soured. "What are you doing? No one told you to go behind the counter." Andrew cut him off, not loudly, not dramatically, just a silence filled with weight. "I am Andrew Wyatt, the founder and CEO of Wyatt Mart." All movement in the store stopped. A scanner beeped softly, then fell silent. Darren was frozen in place. Jesse was stunned, but not scared, just shocked. And then, calm. Andrew looked directly into everyone's eyes, his voice as steady as a pillar. "I have been here, in disguise, for almost a week. I have listened. I have seen. And what I witnessed has made me question, are we running a business? Or are we running an exploitative system wearing a coat of efficiency?" He took a step toward Jesse, pulling a faded receipt and a photocopied notebook from his back pocket. He, Jesse, paid for the meal of the student who fainted the other day. He reached into his own pocket when a young man was 20 cents short for milk, and for every expense, he recorded it not to be praised, but so that no one else would have to bear the cost. Jesse stood silently. His eyes flickered slightly, but he still said nothing. Andrew turned to Darren, his gaze now like ice. "And you, the man I once commended for increasing sales, built those numbers on the shame, hunger, and trampled dignity of the very people we are supposed to serve." Darren quickly spoke up. I was just following policy. I didn't violate any rules. I hit my targets." "Sir, hit your targets." Andrew interrupted, his voice sharp for the first time. "Then who is responsible for the students who have to skip meals to buy notebooks? Who is responsible for the sale items that are actually expired products with new labels? And who ignored a man like Jesse in order to praise you?" A long silence followed. The employees standing near the exit had timidly moved closer. Their eyes held a sense of awakening and hope. Andrew sighed, as if releasing a year's worth of weight from his shoulders. "Darren Polk, as of this moment, you are suspended. A full investigation will be opened at this branch." Darren stood there, stunned. No one defended him, not a single word of protest. Andrew turned to Jesse, his voice softening, but emotion caught in his throat. "You didn't do it for recognition, but for that very reason. I want you to know that's why it's worth remembering." He held out a brief, signed memo. "Starting tomorrow, Jesse Tran will be the assistant branch manager with a new salary. And if you agree, I would like to establish a scholarship fund for your younger brother on behalf of the entire Wyatt Mart system." Jesse didn't answer right away. His hands clenched slightly, his lips pressed together. Then he slowly nodded. "I didn't do it to be chosen. I just didn't want anyone else to feel the way I once felt as a kid standing at a counter without enough money." Andrew smiled faintly, but his eyes were moist. "That's exactly why you're the one who deserves to lead." At that moment, the whole store was silent. But it wasn't the silence of helplessness. It was the silence of respect, something that cannot be given, cannot be bought, but can only be built through acts of kindness repeated over and over when no one is watching. The next morning, the store was the same. The fluorescent lights still hummed, the snack aisle was still colorful, and students still walked in with the weary faces of a long exam season. But something was very different, not visible, but felt. Behind the counter, Jesse stood tall, his uniform clean, his new name tag gleaming, Jesse Tran, assistant manager. But he was still the same Jesse from yesterday, the one who bent down to pick up a fallen receipt, who said, "Take your time, no rush," to a clumsy student, who was ready to round down a total when he saw someone anxiously counting their coins. No showing off, no change in character. But now, people started to notice, and started to imitate. A new employee that day gave a broken package of cookies to a student who had no money for breakfast. A young woman behind the counter smiled gently at a customer instead of just hitting keys on the register. A new note was posted in the break room, next to the operational rules. Not all help has a barcode. Sometimes, kindness is the best investment a store can make. And right below it was a new announcement: the Student Support Fund for exam season starting at the Northgate branch. Inspired by quiet kindness. Frank, or rather, Darren, never came back. The internal investigation confirmed it all: fraudulent reporting, exploiting policies to squeeze profits, and deceiving the return system. Andrew didn't hold a grand firing ceremony. He just quietly let the office know, "We aren't punishing Darren. We are correcting ourselves for all the other Jessies we haven't seen yet." In the following weeks, 5 pilot branches launched a cost price for final season program, supporting students in need. Employees were given the discretion to offer help when needed without fear of reprimand. It wasn't to turn the company into a charity. It was to rebuild trust, the very thing that had been eroded by blind profit-seeking. Andrew once said, "I don't want a store that sells products. I want a place that sells trust." And this time he was truly starting over, learning from that young cashier. One afternoon, as he was preparing to leave the Northgate branch for the last time, Andrew paused at the exit. Behind him, Jessie was talking to a new student. The girl was fumbling with her wallet, her hands trembling, when Jessie gently pushed a bag of cookies toward her. "It's okay. You're all set. Just focus on your exam. That's enough." The girl looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. She didn't know who she was talking to, but Andrew did. She had just spoken with the future of the company. He smiled and quietly walked out. No announcement needed, no media coverage required, because now kindness had become the culture. It didn't need to be seen, but it would definitely be felt. Sometimes, 20 cents isn't just change. It's the distance between loneliness and hope, between giving up and trying again. If you can lighten someone's burden just a little, do it. Because you never know, that act might become a small flame, illuminating an entire culture.